Imagine waking up to a notification that instantly shifts the reality on the ground, because that is exactly what happened Saturday morning in Israel. We are getting a direct update from Haifa with Enia Krivine, who is the senior director of the Israel program at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. She is right there in the mix, and the atmosphere is intense. When the news broke about a joint operation between the United States and Israel against Iran, it sent a clear signal to everyone that this situation could turn into a hot conflict very quickly. If you are there or you know someone who is, the advice is strict, which is to stay close to shelters, keep track of your family, and keep your eyes glued to the home front command for minute-by-minute safety updates. We have seen hundreds of missiles and payloads launched at Israel. It is not just Iran directly, it could be Houthis or other regional actors, but make no mistake, this feels like a nation at war. Now I saw a comment from one of you named Wendy asking about her family specifically in Haifa, because they are terrified. That is a valid fear. Haifa is a strategic target for the Iranians because it holds one of the biggest ports and key military installations. Enia noted that this is actually the fourth round of direct conflict since the war began on October 7. While there might be a slight lull in the rockets right this second, nobody is letting their guard down. The reality is that Iran still has several thousand rockets at their fingertips. The big question experts are debating right now is whether the regime feels threatened enough to empty that arsenal. It is a waiting game to see if they view this as their last chance to lash out, which means things could get much heavier in the coming hours and days. If you have been following the headlines, you know the game has just changed completely, because we now have confirmation that Supreme Leader Khamenei was killed in a bunker along with other senior leaders. This raises a huge question that Laura sent in, which asks, will this weaken terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah? The short answer is absolutely. These radical Shiite militias rely heavily on that central leadership, so this is a fatal blow to their top thinkers and strategists. But we have to be realistic here, because you cannot just dismantle an apparatus that has been in power for half a century with a single series of strikes. It is deeply rooted, so while it is too early to talk about a full regime change, the trickle-down effect on proxies like the Houthis and Hamas is going to be massive. Now, while we are discussing this, we just got a breaking update from the Associated Press about a massive explosion in the capital of Iran. The Israeli military described it as targeting the heart of the city, and honestly, that specific phrasing is causing some concern. Our expert Enia noted that this language could be easily misinterpreted, because the central message has always been that this war is not against the Iranian people. You have to remember that before the Islamist regime took over in 1979, Israel and Iran actually had very strong ties. In fact, current estimates suggest that only about 15 to 20% of the population actually supports this regime in a country of over 100 million people. So when the military says heart of the city, they likely mean the assets that act as the lifeblood of the regime, and not the civilian population. But those specific words really matter right now. You might be wondering exactly what our viewer Lily A is asking right now. If the top Iranian leaders have been taken out, why is the country still fighting back? It makes sense to think that if you cut off the head, the body should stop moving, but the reality on the ground is way more complicated. You have to remember that this regime has been in power and almost completely unchallenged since 1979. That is a long time to build a massive system. There are literally thousands of people deeply embedded in this structure who benefit from keeping it alive. So one military operation, even a successful one, is not going to topple that entire apparatus overnight. The message coming from the US and Israel is that real change has to come from the Iranian people themselves. And we actually saw a glimpse of that tension recently. Remember those huge protests about 6 weeks to 2 months ago? The people were out in the streets largely because of severe economic strife and sanctions related to the nuclear program, but it went deeper than just money. That internal pressure is real, but dismantling a system this old is a huge challenge. Have you ever wondered if we are staring down the barrel of a nuclear war with Iran? It is the kind of question that keeps you up at night, and viewer Steve Brewer asked exactly that. He wanted to know what the chances are of a nuclear strike during this conflict. Here is the reassurance you might need right now. The experts say the chances are actually slim to none. Why? Because preventing a nuclear war is the entire reason this operation is happening in the first place. This is not about starting a nuclear exchange, it is about stopping Iran from ever getting the bomb. If you look back to June 2025, during the 12-day war, we saw something unprecedented. The United States brought in massive B-2 bombers and took out Iranian nuclear facilities that everyone thought were untouchable. But even after after that, and despite the Trump administration trying every diplomatic angle, Iran refused to give up its nuclear ambitions or rejoin the global community. They just would not come to the table. Now another viewer named Yama asked how long this war is expected to continue, and honestly the answer is pretty straightforward. Do not expect a long drawn-out conflict. The United States and Israel have amassed such overwhelming firepower that Iran simply cannot compete. They are completely outgunned and outmaneuvered. The ultimate goal here is to empower the Iranian people to overthrow a regime that has oppressed them for 50 years. Remember the Women Life Freedom campaign? People were beaten just for showing their hair. There is a deep desire for freedom there. And for the United States, this is personal too. We can never forget that during Operation Iraqi Freedom, it is estimated that 1 in 6 United States soldiers killed lost their lives to Iranian weapons. So this mission is also about justice for those families. You are watching a live interview, and suddenly the tone shifts completely because breaking news hits in real time. We just saw a moment that chills you to the bone where the leader of the opposition in Israel was live on air from Tel Aviv, and right in the middle of discussing the killing of Ali Khamenei, he gets interrupted by terrible news. A missile has just hit the city of Bish. We are talking about 8 people killed and dozens wounded, including many children. It puts the whole conversation into a brutal perspective immediately. Now you have to listen to how he frames this, because he calls it a just war despite the chaos. He insists that in a world full of ambiguity, this is a rare case where good and evil are clear-cut. He claims the entire state of Israel is unified behind this, with no difference between coalition and opposition. But the interviewer did not let him off the hook easily. They pushed back hard, asking how you can call it a just war when 150 school children were killed in Iran, and when peace talks in Oman were supposedly just 24 hours away from a deal. This is where the debate gets intense. The opposition leader admits the tragedy of the 150 children, calling it a terrible mistake of war, but he draws a sharp line. He argues that while Israel and the United States aim for military targets and make tragic errors, the other side is actively trying to kill children on purpose. And about those Omani negotiations that were supposedly close to saving the day, he dismisses them entirely as bogus. He says anyone in the room for 5 minutes knew it was just a deception by the regime to buy time for their nuclear and ballistic missile program. He finishes with a statement that really defines their stance, saying we need to stop thinking of Iran as a normal country like India or the United States and start seeing the regime for what he believes it is, a terror organization in disguise.